Hello, welcome back to fineLEARN. I am Kostuvi. This is part 2 of chapter 12 from the NCERT textbook by rssharma. We have been discussing about the state and the Varna society in the age of the Buddha, right? In part 1, we have discussed the material life of the people during the age of the Buddha. We discussed about the NBP, that is the Northern Black Polished Ware phase, right? And here, after talking about the material life, we will now discuss about the administrative system, the social orders, then we'll talk about the army, we'll talk about the taxation system, we'll also learn what a republic is, how it governs or it functions, and what is its difference from a monarchy, right? And in general, we'll try to understand how the age of the Buddha is important in the history of ancient India, right? So let us start. And if you have not gone through part 1, the link is in the description box. You can kindly go through the lecture, right? Now, after talking about the material life, we will now discuss the administrative system of the states during the age of the Buddha. As we have already discussed, in this age we have the rise of the Mahajanapads, right? The large states, 16 big states that are termed as Mahajanapads, right? Now, powerful states are Magadha emerged as the most powerful kingdom, right? Out of all these Mahajanapads. Now, if we talk about the powerful states like Magadha and Kosala, we see that these states were ruled by monarchs, alright, hereditary monarchs, and these monarchs, they belong to the Kshatriya Varna. We already know this, right? And we have seen that the kings, they received the highest official status, and they were also considered as a warlord. Why? Because they kept on conquering and annexing state after state and thereby expanding their kingdom, right? So the king was called the warlord and he received the highest official status, and he also received protection of his persons and his property, right? Now, the king, he worked with some higher officials, right? And they were called the Mahamatras or ministers, that is mantri, right? He also had a commander who is called the Senanayaka, a judge, then a chief accountant, and also head of the royal harem, right? So these are the higher officials with whom the king worked while governing the state, right? And when we talk of Mahamatras or ministers, names of two important ministers, just try to remember the names and to which kingdom they belonged. That is Varsakara, who belonged to the Magadha kingdom, and Dirghacharayana, who belonged to Kosala. Alright, so you might sometimes be asked about to which kingdom these ministers belonged, right? So just try to remember the name and the state to which they belonged. Alright, Varsakara of Magadha, Dirghacharayana of Kosala, they were influential ministers of during that age. Alright. Now if we talk about the rural administration, the rural administration were in the hands of the village headman. Alright, every village had a headman, right? And the headman, he was initially the Gramini. If you can recollect, Gramini is the head of a tribal chief, right? The head of a tribal military unit, alright? Head of a tribal military unit. Now, the headman, initially he was the Gramin. These Graminis, they later came to be called as the village headman. Gramini is a head of a tribal military unit because initially, as we have seen, that the kings, they did not maintain a standing army, but in case of wars, the fightings or the wars were done mainly by the tribal military units, right? And the head of the tribal military units were called Gramini. Now later, after the formation of such states, right, the Graminis, they came to be called as a village headman. Alright. Now the village headman, he was responsible for collection of taxes, assessment and collection of taxes, and also maintenance of law and order in the rural areas. Alright. Now if we talk about the army and taxation, now army and taxation are very important because the success, the real increase in power of a state actually comes from the army of the state, right? From a professional army of the state. And to maintain such a huge army or a professional army, a regular taxation system is again very important. Alright, so army and taxation are very important points to be studied. Now, formation of a large professional army indicates real increase in state power, right? As we have said. Now, use of elephants. Now, while discussing about Magadha or the success of Magadha as a most powerful kingdom, we have seen that the Magadhan princes they also used elephants, right? They had the huge elephantry which actually added an edge to their success, alright? Because they used elephants to move in areas which were marshy or the areas which were not communicable by other means of transport, right? So use of elephants gave an edge to the Magadhan princes. Now from the records we have seen that Kshatriyas and the Brahmanas, they were exempted from tax payments. Alright, Kshatriyas and Brahmanas were exempted from tax payments, and the main taxpayers were the Vaishyas. Who are the Vaishyas? The peasants, mainly the peasants, and other taxpayers they included in as Vaishyas, right? So they were the main taxpayers. Vaishyas were the main taxpayers. And if you remember, while talking about the Vedic period, we also had a term called Bali. Bali, which was a kind of voluntary offering that was made by the tribes or the tribal people to their chief, right? A voluntary offering. But now in this period we have come to see that Bali, which was initially a voluntary offering, now in this age it has actually become a compulsory payment. A compulsory payment to be made by the peasants, right? And there were also officers who were appointed to collect this Bali, and the officers were called as Bali Sadhakas. Alright, Bali Sadhakas. So this is important, Bali. 1/6 of the produce was collected as tax from the peasants. Now whatever was the total produce from the peasants, 1/6 of that produce was collected as tax. Now because agricultural improvements have been seen, now there was good amount of produce, and it was possible to collect tax on a regular basis. Alright. And peasants, not just this, peasants were also sometimes subjected to forced labor for royal work. Alright. As we have discussed, the advent of writing, it has also helped in bookkeeping, right? In assessment and collection of taxes. Alright. And it is seen that payments were made in cash and kind, both in cash and kind, and in some parts of northeastern India, it is also seen that payments were also made in terms of paddy. Alright, in terms of paddy. The artisans, they also had to work for a day in the month for the king. Alright, and the traders, they also had to pay customs on the sale of their commodities. Alright, and these customs paid by the traders are collected by officers who are called Salkika or Sulkadhyaksha. Okay, so you should try to remember the names of these officers who are appointed for different duties. Alright, you might be asked the Salkika or this officer is appointed for collection of this or for doing this, right? So try to remember the names of these officers and their functions. Now, during the Vedic period, we have seen popular assemblies like the Sabhas and the Samitis, right? Sabhas and Samitis. But during this period, we see that those popular assemblies like Sabha and Samiti, they have totally disappeared. Instead, we see another body that is called Parishad. Okay, a small body called Parishad, which now emerged, and this body consisted exclusively of Brahmanas. Alright, so Sabhas and Samitis disappeared, and Parishad, which consisted exclusively of Brahmanas, they emerged. And the tribes slowly disintegrated into different Varnas and the caste groups. Now let us talk about the republics. What a republic is, how it functions, and how it differs from a monarchy, right? Now republics, they existed mainly in the Indus basin. In the Indus basin or in eastern UP and Bihar. So mainly in these two areas we saw the presence of or formation of republics. Alright, now what is a republic? Now first let us understand why these republics grew in these areas, right? Now republics in the Indus basin, they were mainly remnants of the Vedic tribes. Alright, remnants of the Vedic tribes, and it is said that in eastern UP and Bihar, the republics grew maybe because people wanted to go back to that stage of tribal equality. Alright, so we have republics in these two areas, right? And what is a republic actually? In a republic, we have many tribal oligarchs, okay, who are called rajas, right? Now, in case of a republic, the real power laid with the tribal oligarchies, right? Tribal oligarchies are republics. Now, in case of a monarchy, what happens? We have a single king who rules over the entire kingdom, right? But in case of republic, the entire state is divided into some smaller parts, and each part has a raja, right? Each part has a raja, and he was also called as the tribal oligarch. right? A tribal oligarch. That means in case of a monarchy, we have rule of a single person, that is the king, whereas in case of a tribal oligarchy or in case of a republic, we have rule by many people or many kings or rajas. Alright, they were called rajas, right? Now, if we talk about the administrative machinery of some of the republics, like Sakyas and Lichavis, they were republics. Now, their administrative machinery, if we have to look into, you can see that they consisted of the Raja, alright, who was called the Raja, the chief was the Raja. Then there was a vice king who was called the Uparaja. Then there was a commander who was called the Senapati. And there was also a treasurer who was called the Bhandagarika. Alright, so these four were the important persons, right, in the administrative machinery of the republics: Raja, Uparaja, Senapati and Bhandagarika. Alright. So here the real power laid with each of these rajas. Alright. And in case of a monarchy, what happened? If we have to just point out the differences point-wise, right? Now, in case of a monarchy, what happens? The entire revenue of the state was claimed by the monarch or the king, right? But in case of a republic, each Raja or each tribal oligarch was a recipient of revenue, right? So each Raja could claim revenue, right? Now, here in case of a republic, every Raja was free to maintain his own army, whereas in case of a monarchy, we have a single large standing army of the king. Right? In case of a republic, however, each Raja or every Raja was free to maintain his own army under his own Senapati. Alright? This is another difference. Now, in case of a republic again, Brahmanas, they found no place. Right? So, Brahmanas, they had no place in the republics, whereas we know the influence of the Brahmanas, right? How high was their influence in case of a monarchy, right? Now, republics, they function under the leadership of oligarchic assemblies and not under an individual, right? Whereas in case of a monarchy, we see that the entire state, it functioned under one individual, that is the monarch or the king, right? So, these are the differences of a republic from a monarchy, right? However, we see that monarchies are more common. Right? Monarchies are more common, and in general, monarchies were looked upon as the most important form of government and not the republics. Right? So, slowly, the republican tradition became feeble, mainly from the period of the Mauryas. Alright? It slowly became feeble. Now, let us talk about the social orders and legislation during the age of Buddha. Right? If we have to point out, the Indian legal system and the judicial system, it actually originated in this period. Right? And the tribal communities, they were now clearly divided into four classes. Clear division is now seen. Right? The four classes we already know, they are the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and the Sudras. Right? And the Dharma Sutras, they have laid down specific duties for each of these four Varnas. Alright? Specific duties have been laid down for each of the four classes. And civil and criminal law, they were also based on the Varna system, right? So, civil and criminal law was again not uniform, and it was based on the Varna system. And it is said that, or it was believed that, the higher was the Varna, the purer it was, alright? It was believed this way, alright? And the criminal laws and the civil laws, they were administered by royal agents, right? And the punishments were quite rough during that period, right? And as is seen, Sudras, they are deprived of the religious and legal rights. Alright, they were deprived of the rights. And the crimes committed by Sudras against the Brahmanas or any other Varnas, they were punished very severely, whereas the crimes which are committed against the Sudras, they were punished lightly. So, we can see the differences in the laws, right? And the Sudras, they could not be invested with Upanayana. What is Upanayana? We have read it already. It is that sacred thread ceremony, right? Sacred thread ceremony. Sacred thread ceremony that was done for the upper three Varnas and not for the Sudras, right? And the Sudras, they were also not appointed to any of the high posts. That is, their position was inferior of all, right, in the society. And even Jainism and Buddhism, these religions which flourished during that age, they also could not make any substantial change in the position of the Sudras. Although by this time the Sudras, they could attend the new religious orders, right? They could be admitted to these new religious orders. However, their general position, right, their position or their status in general in the society, it remained low. All right. Now let us just summarize and see the importance of the age of Buddha. Fine. The Indian polity, economy and society actually took shape during this period. Important point. Then we see the use of iron tools in agriculture, in craft, and these actually gave rise to an advanced food producing economy, right? Advanced food producing economy. Now, because of an increased or an advanced food producing economy, we see a more amount of produce, because of which it was now possible to collect taxes on a regular basis, right? A regular tax collection was now possible, and because of this regular tax collection, a large maintenance of a large or a strong and professional army was also made possible, right? And because of this, actually now the larger states, they could sustain better. Larger states could be founded in and they could sustain better, right? And as we have seen, the Varna order in the society, it has been very clearly divided, right? The Varna order has been very clearly laid down, and the functions of each of these four Varnas are also very clearly stated. We already know this, but if we just have a look again, right? The priests and the teachers were the Brahmanas, the rulers and the fighters, they were the Kshatriyas, the peasants and the taxpayers, they are the Vaishyas, and the Sudras are the ones who had to serve all the upper three Varnas. Alright, so these are the functions of each Varna which have been very clearly laid down. Right, so these are actually the importance or the specific points if we talk about the age of the Buddha, right? Now I think we have an idea of the 6th century BC. We have actually gone through many 4 to 5 previous lectures which tell where we have been discussing about the period of 6th century BC, right? And here again in chapter 12 we have learned about the NBP phase, Northern Black Polished Ware phase, and we have also discussed about the states or how states functioned there in their time, and we have also discussed in detail about the Varna society and the social orders. Right, so if you have not gone through the previous lectures, do go through them. Okay, you can find the link in the playlist. Okay, it will be given in the description box, so that you can frame a clear idea in your mind about the happenings in India in around the 6th century BC. Right, you will have a clear picture, and it will also help you in actually framing a good answer. Fine. So I hope the video was useful for you, and in the next lecture we will be talking about a very important chapter of ancient history, that is the age of the Mauryas. Right, a very important part of ancient history. We will talk about Chandragupta Maurya, we will talk about Ashoka, and many other important points are there to be discussed. Right, so till we meet next, do like the video if you liked it, do share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, keep learning.